Hello everyone, my name is Jaleel and today we will cover Chapter 9's Cognitive Development in Middle Childhood. Let's look at our objectives to begin. We will first cover Piaget's theory of the concrete operational stage, then information processing, individual difference in mental development, language development, and lastly, learning in school. The concrete operational stage extends from about 7 to 11 years, where thoughts are more logical, flexible, and organized. Passing conservation tasks is evidence of operations where logical rules are applied. Children in this stage are capable of decentration, where they focus on several aspects of a problem and relating them rather than just one. They can also demonstrate reversibility, or the capacity to think through a series of steps and then mentally reverse direction, returning to the starting point. Between ages 7 and 10, children are more aware of classification hierarchies and can focus on relations between a general category and two specific categories at the same time. Collections become common in middle childhood, such as collecting Pokemon cards, rocks, and bottle caps. Do you remember the object you used to classify and collect during your middle childhood? Mine were insects and snails. As shown in the image on the right, a 9-year-old girl sorts and classifies her extensive shell collection. Moving on to seriation. This is the ability to order items quantitatively, such as length or weight. The concrete operational child can also seriate mentally an ability called transitive inference. This means that children can integrate three relations at once. Spatial reasoning also improves at this stage. Around age 8 to 10, children's maps become better organized, showing landmarks along an organized route. They learn to infer an overall layout by relating separate parts together. For example, they can create mental representations of familiar large-scale spaces, such as their neighborhood or school. The limitation in concrete operational thinking is that children think in an organized, logical fashion only when dealing with concrete information they can perceive directly. So, abstract ideas are harder for them to grasp as well as hypothetical ones. According to Piaget, brain development combined with experience in a rich and varied external world would lead children everywhere to reach the concrete operational stage at about the same time. But recent evidence indicates that specific cultural and school practices have much to do with mastery of Piagetian tasks. For example, as shown in the picture on the right, an Indian girl learns the centuries-old practice of backstrap weaving. Although these children might do poorly on Piaget's task, they are proficient at complex mental transformations required to master intricate weaving techniques. Concerning the information processing view of concrete operational thought, Robbie Case proposed that, with practice, cognitive schemes demand less attention and become more automatic. Case and other information processing researchers have examined children's performance in a wide variety of tasks, including solving arithmetic world problems, understanding stories, drawing pictures, and interpreting social situations. In the evaluation of the concrete operational stage, Piaget was correct that school-age children approach many problems in more organized, rational ways than preschoolers. But disagreement continues over whether this difference occurs because of the continuous improvement in logical skills, discontinuous restructuring of children's thinking, or maybe is it both? Moving on to information processing. In contrast to Piaget's focus on overall cognitive change, the information processing perspective examines separate aspects of thinking. Working memory capacity continues to increase in middle childhood, yielding significant advances in their attention, planning, memory, and self-regulation. Improved performance on working memory tasks is supported by brain development, and working memory benefits from enhanced speed of thinking. Children with limited working memories can learn through interventions that reduce memory load, such as communicating in short sentences, repeating task instructions, breaking complex tasks into manageable parts, and encouraging use of external memory aids. Executive function undergoes its most energetic period of development during children's school years as their prefrontal cortex continues to develop. As shown in the picture, the map-making project requires fourth graders to coordinate relevant information in working memory, restrain inappropriate responses, and flexibly implement strategies. Sadly, poverty and stressful living conditions can undermine executive function with negative consequences for academic achievement and social adjustment. Attention becomes more selective, adaptable, and planful. Unfortunately, some children have difficulties paying attention. Later in the next slide, I will further discuss a specific type. Concerning memory strategies or activities we use to store and retain information, children have several strategies. These are rehearsal by repeating the information to themselves and organization by grouping related items together. And by the end of middle childhood, children start to use elaboration by creating a relationship or shared meaning between two or more pieces of information that don't belong to the same category. The long-term knowledge base grows larger and becomes organized into increasingly elaborate structured networks. This rapid growth of knowledge helps children use strategies and remember. So, knowing more about a topic makes new information more meaningful and familiar, so it's easier to store and retrieve. Children who are expert in an area are usually highly motivated. In this slide, we will cover children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, which involves inattention, impulsivity, and excessive motor activity resulting in academic and social problems. Children with ADHD cannot stay focused on tasks that requires mental effort for more than a few minutes. They often act impulsively, lashing out with hostility when frustrated as shown in the image. Many are hyperactive, exhausting parents and teachers, as well as irritating other children with their excessive motor activity. This runs in families and is highly heritable. Several genes that disrupt functioning of neurotransmitters involved in inhibition and cognitive processing have been implicated in the disorder. ADHD is associated with environmental factors such as exposure to prenatal teratogens such as tobacco and alcohol. They can also combine with certain genotypes to greatly increase risk of the disorder. Prescribed stimulant medications are the most common treatment for ADHD, but the most effective treatment approach combines medication with the interventions that model and reinforce appropriate academic and social behavior. This is usually a lifelong disorder, so adults with ADHD continue to need help in structuring their environments, regulating negative emotion, selecting appropriate careers, and understanding their condition as a biological deficit rather than a character flaw. The development of memory strategies is not just a product of a more competent information processing system, but also depends on task demands and cultural circumstances. For instance, a repeated finding is that people in non-Western cultures who lack formal schooling rarely use or benefit from instructions in memory strategies. Pictured in the top left is an 8-year-old Ethiopian child winding cotton into a bobbin for weaving. Despite his keen memory for the complex steps of this task, he might have difficulty recalling the isolated bits of information that school tasks often require. Children's theory of mind, or set of ideas about mental activities, becomes more elaborate and refined. Their improved ability to reflect on their own mental life is another reason that their thinking advances. Concerning cognitive self-regulation, school-aged children often have difficulty putting what they know about thinking into action. They are not yet good at monitoring progress toward a goal, checking outcomes, or redirecting unsuccessful efforts. But children who do acquire effective self-regulatory skills develop a sense of academic self-efficacy or confidence in their own ability, which supports future self-regulation. Fundamental discoveries about the development of information processing have been applied to children's learning of reading and math. Reading makes use of many skills at once, taxing all aspects of our information processing system. And math teaches in elementary school builds on and greatly enriches children's informal knowledge of number, concepts, and counting. Pictured in the bottom left are first graders gaining conceptual knowledge that helps them become more effective math problem solvers, using blocks to understand number and place values. Virtually all intelligence tests provide an overall score, or the IQ, which represents general intelligence, or reasoning ability, along with separate scores measuring specific mental abilities. But intelligence is a collection of many capacities, not all of which are included in currently available tests. In recent efforts to define intelligence, some researchers combine the mental testing approach to defining intelligence with the information processing approach. Sternberg's triarchic theory of successful intelligence identifies three broad interacting intelligences. First is analytical intelligence or information processing skills. Second is creative intelligence or the capacity to solve novel problems. And third is practical intelligence or application of intellectual skills in everyday situations. Intelligent behavior involves balancing all three to succeed in life according to one's personal goals and the requirement of one's cultural community. On the other hand, Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences defines intelligence in terms of distinct sets of processing operations that permit individuals to engage in a wide range of culturally valued activities. Dismissing the idea of general intelligence, Gardner proposes at least 8 independent intelligence which are linguistics, logico-mathematical, musical, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, naturalist, interpersonal, and intrapersonal. Pictured here are children expanding and enriching their naturalist intelligence through a project aimed at improving sea turtle nesting habitats. Now we move on to individual and group differences in IQ. In nature versus nurture, when young children are adopted into caring, stimulating homes, their IQs rise substantially compared with the IQ of non-adopted children who remain in economically deprived families. But adopted children benefit to varying degrees because in one investigation, children of two extreme groups of biological mothers, those with IQs below 95 and those with IQs above 120, were adopted at birth by parents who were well above average in income and education. During the school years, the children of the low IQ biological mothers scored above average in IQ, but they did not do as well as children of high IQ biological mothers placed in similar adoptive families. Thus, research confirms that heredity and environmental contribute jointly to IQ. In cultural influences, a controversial question raised about ethnic differences in IQ has to do with whether they result from test bias. Therefore, communication styles, knowledge from cultural upbringing, stereotype are taken into consideration, reducing cultural bias in testing. On the image, fear of being judged based on a negative ethnic stereotype may be behind the child's reluctance to try a new task in school. Vocabulary, grammar, and pragmatics continue to develop in middle childhood. They develop language awareness and add to their vocabularies by analyzing the structure of complex words. As their knowledge expands and becomes better organized, older school-age children think about and use words more precisely. For example, in addition to the verb fall, they use topple, tumble, and even plummet. Mastery of complex grammatical constructions improves as well as the understanding of infinitive phrases. Improvements in pragmatics. The communicative side of language also occurs. In families who regularly eat meals together, children are advanced in language and literacy development. Mealtimes offer many opportunities to relate complex, extended personal stories as shown on the top left image. Many children grow up bilingual. This happens first by acquiring both languages at the same time in early childhood, or second is by learning a second language after mastering the first. Several research shows that children who are fluent in two languages outperform others on tests of selective attention, inhibition of irrelevant information, analytical reasoning, concept formation, and cognitive flexibility. They are also advanced in certain aspects of language awareness such as detection of errors in grammar and meaning. The advantages of bilingualism causes schools to offer bilingual education programs, such as language immersion programs. Evidence cited throughout this chapter indicates that schools are vital forces in children's cognitive development. Now, traditional versus constructivist classrooms. In a traditional classroom, the teacher is the sole authority for knowledge, rules, and decision making, while students are relatively listening, responding, and completing assignments. A constructivist classroom, in contrast, encourages students to construct their own knowledge. In social constructivist classrooms, children participate in a wide range of challenging activities with teachers and peers with whom they jointly construct understandings. As children acquire knowledge and strategies through working together, they become competent, contributing members of their classroom community and advance in cognitive and social development. Evidence also confirms that peer collaboration promotes development only under certain conditions. A crucial factor is cooperative learning, in which small groups of classmates work toward common goals. By resolving differences of opinion, sharing responsibilities, and providing one another with sufficient explanations to correct misunderstandings. In teacher-student interaction, children may adopt teachers' positive or negative views and start to live up to them, known as educational self-fulfilling prophecies. For children with learning difficulties, U.S. legislation mandates that schools place children who require special supports for learning in the least restrictive or as close to normal as possible environments that meet their educational needs. In inclusive classrooms, students with learning difficulties learn alongside typical students in the regular educational setting for all or part of the school day, a practice designed to prepare them for participation in society and to combat prejudices against individuals with disabilities. Shown in the top right picture is an inclusive first grade classroom where a teacher encourages special needs students' active participation. They're also likely to do well if they receive support from a special education teacher. For gifted students or those displaying exceptional intellectual strengths, debate about the effectiveness of school programs for the gifted typically focuses on factors irrelevant to giftedness, whether to provide enrichment in regular classrooms, pull children out for special instruction, or advance brighter students to a higher grade. Overall, gifted children fare well academically and socially. Now, how well educated are U.S. children? Well, U.S. students typically perform at or below the international averages. But why though? According to the international comparisons, instructions in the United States is less challenging, more focused on absorbing facts, and less focused on high-level reasoning and critical thinking than in other countries. Now, can you answer these 5 recap questions? What are the major characteristics of concrete operational thought? What are the symptoms, origins, and treatment options for children with ADHD? What 3 interacting intelligences are involved in Sternberg's triarchic theory? What positive consequences do bilingualism bring to children's cognitive development? And lastly, how do schools serve children with special learning needs? Here's my reference page, and thank you everyone for listening to my presentation in Chapter 9's Cognitive Development in Middle Childhood.